Hello, I'm really glad you joined me. I'm Susan Regan. I'm a relationship expert and coach, a therapist, and a mediator, and I specialize with helping people contemplate separation and divorce and figure out if they're one that's wanting to initiate it or there's one of you that is planning on feeling like this is going to or bound to happen, that I want you to be prepared. I want you to actually understand some of the emotions that might be happening for you and to have a sense of what kind of support to get, how to do it so that you're not alone, and having some of the emotional, educational things in place so that you know actually what's happening. It's so important to demystify a process that seems so overwhelming. One of the first things that I wanted to bring you through was the idea that this is not just a legal and financial issue. This is not something that you can just navigate with a professional just doing the whole thing. You have to have some say about it, and you also have to actively try to heal yourself from it and to look at your own emotional state and to figure out, okay, what is going to be the team of people I put around myself so I can get through this. And we all know that it will affect every aspect of your life, and you shouldn't be afraid of that. You should just be prepared for that. So, who you socialize with, where you live, how your financial situation might change, who your friends are, what kind of community have you shared with your partner? All of these things will change over time. Your ability to concentrate, your developing new internal strengths so that you can actually stabilize and balance yourself. To understand what the grief cycle is and what stage of grief you're in and what stage of grief you get stuck in. All of these things will be things that I go through one at a time with some exercises so that you can contemplate, write about them. You can actually send me messages about them, areas where you're stuck or you have more concerns. But I want you to just sit back, have something to write with, pause when you need to, and just jot down some of the things that you're feeling will help you to have some thorough thinking about so that you can navigate this with more balance in your life. I've also provided a workshop that you can print out ahead of time and just go through some of these topics on your own. You'll notice that I'll take some time to pause when I'm changing into the next topic so that you'll be prepared to think about another subject that's a little different than what we've been talking about. So, again, thank you for clicking on this workshop. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm hoping that you'll find some relief, information, and support to help you through this process. So, the goals I have for this workshop are that you could get some clarity, tools, emotional support, and community from just thinking about some of the aspects of separation and divorce. One of the very first things that I want you to look at and think about is your own nervous system. How are you doing? When are you the most upset? And when are things getting triggered inside of you? Sometimes there's a certain time of the day that's really upsetting. Sometimes there's a certain thought or change that feels overwhelming and devastating. Whatever it is, I want you to start honing into when this happens and start using some tools to get yourself more centered. So, firstly, let's work with this idea of how's your nervous system doing. Take a few breaths, feel your feet on the floor, and notice where inside of your body you might feel agitated, scared, devastated, relieved. These are some of the feelings. You might have different ones. And notice what feelings are associated with that feeling in your body. If I named one of the ones, great. If not, think about some other feelings that are coming up for you. and reflect on and get to know that this might be a reaction to something that's happening, and to start noticing that pattern. Maybe it's that you come back to an empty place at night and that feeling starts coming in the pit of your stomach that there's nobody there, that you're lonely, that you maybe feel nervous about being there on your own. Maybe you walk into a place that you've walked into a million times, like the grocery store, and you notice that you get overwhelmed there because maybe that's a time where all your feelings come to the surface. Maybe there's memories and associations that are held with that errand. So notice the emotion and reflect on why you're feeling this way. And this kind of observation of yourself will help give you some tools or some ideas about where you need to insert tools. So notice what's going on, the connection between the thoughts and the feelings, or the feelings and the thoughts. And give yourself some space around this. The next and most important thing is to develop a team of people that are going to support you through this process. You can get through this process. I know you can. It might not be pleasant, and it might not be anything that you've chosen or something that you don't know how you're going to get out of. But you can do it a lot better if you have support. So if you are able to create some confidants around you so that these confidants are people that you can call 24/7, or they're willing to listen to you and what's going on with you. And they're sort of a neutral party to your social system or your work system. They're not as engaged with people that you're really close to, or your ex, or to be soon to be ex. They're able to see you in very many different situations and not have a negative feeling or behavior that they display just because they're maybe uncomfortable for you. And they're also someone who is available. So I know for myself, I've asked people, you need to make sure that you ask who the confidants, if they're really going to be available. Because sometimes people can't be when there's a crisis. They've got too much going on themselves. So really ask them to be honest. Can you be available if I need to talk or if I'm having a hard time? Do you have some time for that in your schedule? Some people will automatically be able to be available to you, some won't. And if you feel like this is too personal and you don't want people involved, then find professional circles that are led by professionals where you can be anonymous and actually get support. Sometimes this is the best way of getting support because you won't feel like burdened, like, oh, I'm calling this person, but now I have to do something for them. So I really just want to be able to come and go in and out of support as I need it. So support groups are good. CODA meetings, which is codependent anonymous meetings, any kind of 12-step program might help with boundary setting and just self-care. Support groups are great. Therapists, counselors, peer groups around divorce and separation. Sometimes there's church groups that do this, meetups. Meetup is an organization that runs activities, and there might be single events and things like that. But I don't want you to push out too far into spaces of trying to date or trying to be overly social as your first response. I want you to see if you can find places where your emotional needs can be met and where you can start doing some of your emotional work. Here's a story for you. I was working with somebody for many, many years. I do a lot of divorce work and run a lot of divorce groups. And one woman came to the group, and she had been divorced for 5 years. And the reason why she came, and she actually went to two groups at the same time. And the reason why she came was because she said nothing in her life has changed one iota since her divorce. Her house was arranged the same. She kept her lifestyle the exact same, her routine the exact same. And it was just as if someone had taken her person out and just removed them from her situation, and nothing else changed except for that person was removed. she realized that she was stuck and had actually made an agreement with herself that it was less painful to be stuck than to go into the work. And then there was a certain day in her life where she was like, no, I need to go into the work. It's more painful to stay in this exact situation and not move forward. So I want you to think about that, is that I want you to manage and pace the change that's coming to you and have the support around you so that you can start addressing some of the things that you're going through and really understanding what it is that's painful. So we talked a little bit about noticing when the triggers come up. The triggers and the nervous system are connected. And so when you get triggered, your nervous system gets offset. And it usually does the same thing every time in response to a trigger, because actually it's a reaction to a trigger. And when you start understanding that what you're reacting to, you can start slowing down, pausing your nervous system, pausing the trigger, and finding ways to respond. And this is a process of awareness. So giving yourself some space to slow down the things that feel so upsetting and triggering, and to try to have a different narrative about what's going on. The other thing I want you to notice is the cycle of grief. And we all know the cycle of grief from other losses that we have. And let me review them though. There's the 5 stages of grief. So, first is denial, where you really are not accepting what's going on. And maybe it's even a shock to your system. You can't believe this is happening, whether it is you're putting something in motion or you're just um, responding to somebody else's need and desire to separate. The second is sadness depression, where you just want to close down and shut off. And you feel an extremely amount of sadness, extreme amount of sadness. Anger is actually, believe it or not, a healthier feeling to have during the grief process, because anger brings action. And it might be this whole idea about what's unfair about your situation, but you'll get sort of churned up and maybe you'll go into healthier action. The other is bargaining. And a lot of times people like, they don't think about bargaining as a stage of grief. They think of it as like, maybe we can find a solution for it. And maybe there's like one more round we can go through to see if we can get this relationship to work. So it's like, if this changed, then this could happen. Or if this changed, maybe we could stay together. And then there's acceptance, which is, okay, I think I can handle what's happening now. I think I understand it. I've worked on this enough. I understand the cycle of this relationship, the unhealthy aspects of the relationship. And I'm also understanding that this is a chapter of my life, that this isn't my whole life falling apart. Sometimes, though, it feels like your whole life is falling apart and that it's never going to be okay again. It feels like abandonment and rejection. But note that you may cycle through these 5 stages, the first 5 stages, in 1 minute, and you may get stuck in one of the stages. If you're stuck in one of them, I really want you to understand, what is that about? What is being stuck in that stage about? Is it a self-protective mechanism, or is it that you only can tolerate that emotion at this time? And it's connected to triggers and your nervous system. That will give you some insight of how to start exploring that stuck grief stage. After you go through these 5 things and do the round and around, round robin with these things for quite a bit of time, these will happen for the next 2 years, not so regularly, but they might happen like after year 1, during celebration times, during holiday times, during reminiscence times. And there's another stage that happens, which is stage 6. And this is the stage that occurs in a loss of relationship, which is that you will start looking at I might want to have a healthier relationship with my friends, families, work, myself, if I ever get into an intimate relationship again. But I really have to look at developing myself a little bit more and understanding what I need to develop in myself to be able to have a healthier relationship or a more satisfactory or deeper or more intimate relationship. That will be your developmental phase of like, okay, now I'm ready to look at myself. Stage of grief is like really being more absorbed in the feelings of what's going on. And stage 6, you're starting to acknowledge and be accountable for the parts of yourself that were in the relationship that were unhealthy and making room to do some work there. Because that would be like developing the capacity to have the kind of relationship you want. The other is stage 7, which is looking at the vision of what you want your life to be now. And that means that it's not going to happen instantly. So it takes patience. And this is a daily visioning practice of, yes, I want to be more active. I want to be more communicative. I want to have healthier friends and healthier routines. And that means actively doing that and practicing that and having people who are also working on themselves around you so that you have the capacity, you develop the capacity to change. The next section is the section of the position that you've held in the separation. Just in terms of looking at your position in the separation, it also will reflect on some of the position that you had in the marriage. So this is good information for you because this is some of what your mind needs to hear is more rationale about why this is happening and how it affects you. And if you have more active choices about how to behave and tolerate or gain new coping mechanisms. So aside from the stages of grief, there is an emotional feedback loop that happens for each person. So let's say the initiator has a feedback loop of guilt and responsibility. And typically, what I see is the initiator has kind of sat on the information of wanting to leave for a really long time. And they just decided they didn't want to hurt people in the family. They didn't want to hurt their partner. They didn't want, necessarily life to change for themselves. So they just like kept doing their responsibility. And then when they finally get to the point of letting the other person know, and that could be in an acting out kind of way, like with an affair or with a sudden move out, or sometimes it's even with a mental health issue, like a big depression comes on, whatever that might be, the other person, the recipient, is shocked because they're not up to speed on the unhappiness of the initiator. And so they're feeling hope and rejection, meaning that sometimes the initiator just coming and talking to them about what's been wrong and how they're feeling and how they really don't want to be in the relationship anymore is kind of a relief to the recipient because they're like, okay, now I know what's wrong. Now I know it's been wrong, and maybe we can address it. So oftentimes the initiator with hope and rejection is cycling through two things and their emotional states. And one is the hope of like, well, maybe this closeness and this communication and this perceived interest in the recipient to figure out how to deal with the next change. Because when you do separate, you have to come together to talk about all the details of what you're going to do. And that sometimes feels like working things out. So there's the mixed message piece. So when the rejection comes in, it's like, oh, we're not working it out to go back together. We're working it out to separate. Then rejection brings on the emotion of anger. So it's really important to know where you are in the initiator and recipient cycle, and to know whenever you are in that feedback loop of guilt and responsibility or hope and rejection, it is not a good time to make decisions. You really have to work on getting back to baseline and seeing things the way they are and dealing with things decision by decision, not caught up in, I would call it the rumination fantasy of what the feedback loop emotions lead you to. There's also another scenario that I see, scenario 3, with the position of people in the separation. And that is that oftentimes a person will hold both positions, meaning the initiator might initiate the separation and they might just, that's all they do, and they just kind of go away. They don't want to do any other work because maybe some of what they got burnt out on was they maybe were trying to change things or didn't know how to change things. So they don't want to add any more energy to the relationship. Or maybe sometimes the reason for the separation is like addiction, right? Or affair, something like that, that is a real act out. And it feels like it's like something else got triangled into the relationship. And in this case, sometimes the recipient, even though they're more emotionally labile, they're really having a harder time. They have to actually initiate the divorce. They actually have to do the separation. They have to take the action because the other person could only actually deliver the information either in an acting out way or a verbal way, and that's all they can do. And so it's really challenging for that person who ends up taking on both positions and to actually go forward and move forward with the separation, because it is a time of feeling really overburdened by grief emotions and also needing to take action so that things move forward, or they feel more protected and safe, or that they just like pick up the pieces of what the person isn't able to do, the initiator. So I really hope that clears up some of the ideas of how to understand your situation and what's going on for you. You can extend that thinking into, how does that explain my position in the relationship? And another question I always ask people is, do you understand and see the damage that happened to you during the marriage? Because sometimes this over responsibility feeling, like of the initiator, for example, really has a detrimental effect. And sometimes the recipient feels like they become so passive because they're not getting their needs met with the initiator, and they are in a relationship that feels really unequal. And I'm just saying that is one example. So this is another insight that helps create what I call is the narrative of the what happened in the relationship. So let me take a few minutes to tell you about the narrative. So the narrative is the story that you tell yourself. You will tell yourself a different story when you're with your confidants, right? When you're with people that aren't going to be gossipers and not going to be a negative influence in the community you live in. But you can tell them what your story was about the marriage. Together, though, when if you have kids or if you're really involved in a community, you should try for the health of your community and your family, your extended family, come up with a narrative that you both share. This actually makes it so that people don't take sides as often. People still might, and they might try to figure out who's the one that committed the crime here. So that's always a human tendency to figure out who was wrong. But my thought is, if you are going to be more engaged in community and if you're trying to make this a healthier process for yourself in your life and learn from this and like learn how to communicate about hard things, you might want to try to compromise on what the narrative is. And sometimes that's really difficult, especially if there was an affair, especially if there's a reputation to try to save, especially if you feel like there's kids coming back and forth. You really want, for the kids' self-esteem sake, to make sure that you uphold their feelings about their other parent. That's so important. And that you actually ask the community to do that as well. Like, for example, here's a narrative that two parents sometimes give. Relationships are complicated and complex, as you know. This is them talking to some parts of their school community. And we've decided we're better parents than we are a couple. So we've decided to separate and really focus on parenting our kids. If you're noticing that they're having a hard time, please let us know. But we're really trying to stay neutral to positive about each other so the kids never feel uncomfortable if each of us are together. And that's what we're working on. And sometimes it may be a little challenging, and we're asking for your help too, to not talk about either of us negatively or to gossip about us. That would really help us and our family. If it's people that don't have kids, it could, and it's a reputation, a public reputation. It's really important that you differentiate like how the divorce is going to affect each of your lives, and to try to make some kind of commitments. You might not be able to do this, right? But self-commitments and commitment to your soon to be ex, if that is something that you really feel like is in the integrity and the forward motion that you want to do. So I really want you to think about that. So we have the three messages. One is always to the kids first, and it's a very neutral message. I always tell people, like, when you're doing the neutral message and you're telling people, you don't really give them a lot of information except for one paragraph. What's happening, what should they expect, and what might look different from them in their position in your life. So we have kids, we have your family of origin, right? Your extended family on both sides, a narrative for them that's kind of similar, not so much detail, and less detail for your community. And you're really orchestrating this. And you're also, orchestrating who's been told and who hasn't been told. So remember, I always think about this as an elevator talk, right? So let's say you go to the elevator, you press the button, the elevator door opens, and someone in the elevator is like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And you answer, "Oh, I'm getting divorced," and blah, 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 like just regurgitating everything that's going on with you. And then the elevator door closes, and you're not able to actually get any, you know, thoughts or feelings from the other person, and you're left with all of them. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I don't even know how that person's thinking of me. So I want you to think about that when you're talking to people, and if that person has been told, or if they need to be told, and to think about the timing of that. People do all sorts of things. Sometimes people send a quick email. Sometimes for the people that are in the inner circle, they make calls. Whoever was that person was their friend or the closer connection. So it's really about, also when you're in community with people, helping other people process what's going on with you two, if there is a change, so that people know what's going on. I also really want you to know that I think timing is up to you. Sometimes people are too upset and grieving too much that they really can't talk about it. And I think that is completely fine. Sometimes people do the hardest thing first, like they might do the move out first. And then they don't do much after that. They kind of take their time on that. And that would be also with telling people. You just have to deal with whatever reality and whatever day-to-day life you deal with in your, neighborhood or work environment or community. So I would ask you to do some thinking about that. So be on the lookout for the hidden challenge. We all have different relationships, different marriages, different social situations, different complications in our finances. And so there will be something hidden agenda item that you haven't considered that will cause you a lot of stress. So this is why you have your 24/7 confidants. This is why you're starting to develop a team approach to help yourself get the support you need through the separation. And this is the reason why you use professionals. And you can use professionals, in ways that are not expensive. Like, professionals are like peers that actually do peer support around, um, helping you get through it if you can't afford, and I mentioned earlier groups and things like that, so that you have a place to talk about this that isn't in your daily personal life. That's so, so helpful. So look out for the hidden agenda item that really hurts you and really throws you off. That's an important one to tackle. So then we have our plan, right? We have our plan. It's a self-care plan. How are you going to take care of yourself? Isolation is the enemy. The more you isolate, the harder it is to walk out that door. So start thinking about checking in with yourself throughout the day. I often tell people, set your timer on your phone 3 times a day at least. How are you doing? And how could you check in and help yourself? Maybe say something positive to yourself, have something to look forward to. And then extending from that, like what kind of activities are you going to do to take care of yourself? Hardest time of the day, change your routine. Some people like sat around and had coffee with their soon to be ex, and that's a really hard time of day, and they might just go to the gym. Another one might have a hard time with the dinner hour or weekends. Start creating a plan to take care of yourself. Have places to go, things to do. If it can't be with people that you know, then go into activities that you're more anonymous, whatever it might be, meetings, lectures, movies, places where you might not talk a lot, but you might just have a space to be able to just be and your own thoughts or being entertained or being out in fresh air. Then we have the idea about the weekly check-ins, identifying ways to take care of yourself in a week. If you're having a hard time working and concentrating, tell the people that you work with. Not so much that they would use it against you, but hey, I may have some days that I'm really upset. It has nothing to do with you, and I'm a hard worker. I'll make up that time. Make sure that you're not spending the whole entire weekend on your own. That will be devastating for your mental health when you're going through something. Keep yourself healthily busy, not like overly busy, and watch your substance use. It's really easy to let that creep up. And make sure that you're doing a double check on your mental health all the time, watching whether you're depressed, too depressed to sleep or function. And many of the people I know get on an antidepressant during this time just to have a solid anchoring. And then we have the 90-day check. Okay, so in 12 weeks, what will happen in this time? What will happen? What will you have to deal with? What will you have to contend with? And start really knowing what's ahead of you. Read a lot, like Nolo Press, Do It Your Own Divorce group, book is a really excellent reference because you can kind of see what's the next step. And again, you might just do the hardest thing and put the rest on hold, and that is okay. The other is I want you to think about your persona. So you were a certain person in your marriage. You might have been a certain person when you got into your marriage, and then we're very influenced by the people that we're with. So you might have changed your ways or collaborated a lot, or and then became sort of another person, the person in your marriage, right? So you want to grieve that person in some ways. You might want to look at maybe the aspects of yourself that you didn't like that developed in your marriage. Maybe you nagged a lot. Maybe you yelled a lot. Maybe you shut down a lot. Really look at those parts of yourself that got unhealthy and let's say hello to them again. Who do you want to become? Who's your new persona? Is it going back to some of the old ways you were before you got married? Are there things that you really wanted to do in your marriage that you never got to do? I know some people like they really redecorate their house, they move furniture around. They might not spend a lot of money because the money is changing, but they might move all the furniture around or do things that make them feel better about themselves. Like just really push on what's going to make them feel better and what kind of arrangements that I have to make so that their life will be in a better balance. And this, of course, takes time. So please, please be patient. Your creation of your persona is going to take some time, But in the meantime, you can look at, what do I want things to look like in a month? How do I want to feel? I even like that one of like when you wake up in the morning and you do some kind of reset or centering yourself to start the day. How do I want to feel at the end of the day? How do I feel now? And how do I want to feel at the end of the day? And what am I going to do to be able to preserve that feeling in myself? The same thing is like in a month. What do you hope to have happen in a month? Maybe you have some goals. I want to go to the gym every day. I want to make a few new friends. I want to make sure that I'm regularly getting support. I want to go away a little bit more. I want to get out of town. I want to take day trips. I want to read. I want to be quiet. I want to be okay with myself. And then look at the half a year mark. What's going to happen then that you're predicting? Keep yourself in that moving forward thinking. You know the difference, right? When the divorce conversation is really tough to look at, and when it starts feeling like, no, this is a forward motion conversation. So when people come to talk to me and it's a really upsetting talk and they're going through old emotions, I ask them at the end of the session, and I'm asking you to do this now in this workshop, is to find a container in your imagination that you can open up and put all those divorce sadness stories and all the anger stories and all the things that you were disappointed about and regretful about in your container, and actually close that container, lock it, and don't allow yourself to open that container and look at that all the time. But do it very consciously when you have the time, when you're stronger, when you're not in mid grieving. And meanwhile, keep it somewhere that you can say, okay, well, I'm going to look at that only when I have support and only when I feel like I'm strong enough to tolerate some of these things. So that's a really important thing. And it's symbolic, right? Containing the sadness and the negativity and the anger and the negative feelings you have about your marriage. Contain that look. So this container concept also comes into play with your own boundaries and your own communication with your ex and with the life that you had with your ex, whether it's with their extended family system or certain friends that you may need to set boundaries with. Sometimes people are just too sensitive to actually be around people that remind them of their ex. It's too difficult, or neighborhoods or restaurants or gyms or schools or whatever it might be. So be really delicate with yourself and really identify the trigger points. And for a while, just protect yourself from those. And little by little, you might, there's always this moment where you see your ex in public or you bump into them somewhere and it really throws you off. So boundaries, right? Boundaries, starting to establish boundaries that are protective of you and your emotional state. And the other piece I want you to think about is communication. So sometimes there's a connection that continues. There's probably 15% of people that actually maintain a friendship after their divorce. Some people are friendly, but not friends. Some people become friends because they actually create a distance from their partner that they actually like them again and think, okay, they're fine. I just don't want to be as close as I was to them because we were incompatible in whatever way, shape, or form that was, or I forgive them, or they forgive me, or we forgive each other. But communication can be a hindrance at first because it feels so triggering. So establish communication that's going to be healthy for you. Like, for example, if it's something that needs to be answered right away, could be texted, right? And given a timeline. Hey, can you let me know by the end of the day? I need to know this information. In an email, it would be something that's a longer, doesn't need instant answer, and it can't be negative. So if people are ripping into you in their communications, then you need to start establishing boundaries. I can't have you talk to me that way. Some people actually have their confidants read their emails and texts and they just put them in a file and they don't read them. And just, hey, transcribe this for me. Tell me what I need to answer, or tell me what it said in your own voice, because I can hear that better. So remember, you're responsible for setting up a container that's livable for you. And of course, over time, this will change. It might change so much that you really don't ever want to have interaction with them once everything's figured out. And maybe you have to start getting to the place where you're detaching from them enough to tolerate that. Okay, so don't be afraid of that distance, and don't be afraid to question yourself if you're really triggered, that maybe your boundaries need to be tighter and maybe your communication needs to be different. Sometimes people say, oh, it's easier for me to hop on the phone and just talk to that person and get the answer. In the emails, it goes on, and there's not an understanding about what I'm trying to ask or get from them. So think about what's going to be the least harmful to you as you're starting to get used to things. The first year is full of all sorts of changes, a lot of changes. And that's why I always say, like, after 1 year, there'll be more clear thinking and less emotional, but not always, because sometimes things happen in that first year that are really unexpected. Remember, the best boundaries are the boundaries that help you feel healthier emotionally and physically. I'm not talking about higher level issues like domestic violence or things that you feel like there was a real betrayal. Those things would have to be really honed in on with a professional. And you're welcome to reach out to me if you feel like you're in a situation where you want a consultation and how I would advise you to move forward. But what I really want you to leave this workshop with is a plan, is a strategy, is actually looking at how you're going to handle yourself and understand your emotional state right now. And I don't want you to do this alone. I want you to devise a team around you, a support system around you that's going to help guide you and give you and help you build the resiliency and the reserve that you need to get through this massive change. Because I do feel like with the right kind of support, people can get through the hardest things. And that I do feel like sometimes I hold for people this silver lining, like it's not going to be this way all the time, that things will get better. And as time passes, a certain amount of time needs to pass for things to ease up. Just in closing, I want you to just hear that message from me again, is try to create a team around you and really specify for yourself what is the support I need and go after it. Go after your healing and go after your support. And if there's anything that I could do to add to your thinking around this way of bringing health into what's going on in your life, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I believe that people can transform and have another chapter of their life where they feel loved, satisfied, happy, and that they get to develop the kinds of relationships that they want in the future that bring out and allow them to live being the best that they can be and being really, really honest and true to themselves.